In a day and an age where digital kind of rules everything, there's one element that I think that we all kind of take for granted, and it's kind of a hidden one. It's the power of writing. It's the power of a pencil. And in this two-part series, what we're going to talk about is how to engage your students and how just important it is to write no matter what subject you're teaching. Welcome to the Teach Bigger podcast.
Welcome to the Teach Bigger podcast. I'm Chris Pratt.
I'm Chris Mosley.
And I'm Tyler Lamond.
So the topic of writing, and not just writing in a language arts classroom, but writing, period, in every discipline. So this came up several years ago in my journey as a teacher. And what I began to find was a trend that no matter what district I went to, and I went to a few, the big focus was always getting up the writing test scores because kids don't write well. And it just seemed like an ongoing struggle around the general region that I was teaching. And I don't know if this is a trend across the nation and across the world, but I know that in our area of Texas, it definitely is. And so, administrators and teachers were always trying to figure out, how do we do this? How do we get kids to write more? How do we get them to write better? And, arguably it's understandable because we're living in a day and an age where you don't have to write a lot. In fact, kids are consuming most of the information they get from videos, not from reading.
That's true. I just interject real quick. I did a project this week where my kids had to draw 3 logos and 1 ad for Go Sports Drink Company. And they all looked at me and said, "How are we going to shoot these videos?" I said, "For what videos?" They said, "For the ad." Like their mind is that ads are just videos. And I was like, "What about when you drive down the road and you see like a billboard?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I guess those are technically ads."
That's an ad. Oh.
Wow. I remember a day and age when actually there were newspapers that people read. Does that make me old? I remember.
I only thought that was a myth, like newspaper. That's not a thing.
Right. Like the Sunday morning paper was a thing. And that's where you got your coupons too. And so I remember that. And now that's not how really most people, but especially students, are not consuming written word that way. And so it makes sense then that carries over into the classroom.
Wait, are you talking about like the things like the Houston Chronicle?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a newspaper.
I subscribe to them on YouTube and I follow them on Facebook.
Exactly.
But there's actual like a paper, like you can hold it in your hand.
Oh, where the ink actually stains your fingers as you look through it, right?
That doesn't sound good at all.
I'm so glad they got rid of those. No. Okay.
No, we used to use them to clean.
They're really best to use if you're moving because they keep your dishes safe.
Or if you have an animal, you could let it use,
my grandmother, she's a bird lady. Like she loves birds. And we would always give her our newspapers because, that's what a bird uses.
So same.
Yeah, so that's good. Well, okay, and so even that, if you think about to the extent that students and even adults now, our written language has become text messaging and emojis, and everything is like shortened and abbreviations and acronyms and whatever the case may be. And so we're seeing a generation of students who this really is a struggle for them because it's not the world they're living in. It's not the world they're living in. I remember that when Common Core first came out, there was a big upheaval, right? And, in Texas, we don't necessarily adopt Common Core, but I know that many, many states around the United States have. And one of the big problems that came with that, and a lot of people were really complaining, educators and non-educators alike, was they were taking away the necessity for students to read and write in cursive. Right?
I was never taught. Well, I was, but not very well.
Look,
I was.
And I was too. And I know how to write in cursive. I never do, but I certainly know how to read cursive. And it was crazy because we have students that don't know. It's a foreign language to them. And I always kind of, and there's two things about this. So I was working with a band director, and I hired him his first year teaching. He's a great guy, really smart. And
It's not me.
no, it's not you, because you're not a
Okay.
great guy and you're not very smart. But he's a really great guy and very, very smart. And I remember the moment when an administrator had handwritten me a card, like a thank you card or whatever, and it was to the band or whatever, and she had written in cursive. And he was like, "Hey, what's that?" I was like, "Oh, it's a card from so and so." And I was like, "Here, read it. It's really nice." And he's like looking at it, and I'm not thinking anything of it. I'm thinking he's just reading it, right? And then he looks at me with this puzzled look on his face, and he's like, "I don't know what this says." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "I don't know how to read cursive."
Was that me? I
No,
feel like
it
that
was
was me.
it
No,
wasn't
not
you.
you.
And he was like, "I don't know how to read cursive." And I was like, "Really?" And he was like, "Yes, like literally, this looks like a foreign language to me." And
But
then
we're about the same age, so I guess it's just where you were. Like where you went to school, I guess, because we were taught around the same time. So
Well,
it wasn't like
maybe
it was
so.
phased out,
Yeah.
I guess where you grew up.
Well, I guess so, because the only reason I learned cursive because I'm dyslexic and I had to go to the small group to learn alphaphonics while everyone else learned Spalding. And uh they taught us cursive, but they only taught us the letters. They didn't really teach us how to put it into practice. So like if you write in like 100% perfect like cursive, I can read it. But like people like my mom, who's like, I don't know, she's got to be 70 years old by now. She writes and it's like chicken scratch. And it takes me forever to
To make it
decode
out.
what it is, to be like, okay, that's the L, that's the B, this says this, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. So if you think about it, so that became a huge issue with Common Core, because that wasn't going to be one of the things that was expected to be taught. And at first you kind of go like, well, okay, it's sort of antiquated. Maybe people aren't really writing like that anymore or whatever. But then when you get down to it and you start to realize, for example, all of our founding documents were written in cursive.
Yeah. That's what I
So
was
if
thinking.
you can eradicate cursive writing from the educational system, you will produce an entire generation of people who could not understand the founding documents if they tried, because it will be like a foreign language to them. And so then
Well, I was gonna say, what do you think of a shorthand? Now, I know shorthand's probably not as big as that, but I know that when I was 16, my mom sent me to the store and she gave me her list, and it was written in shorthand, and I came back with milk. Like that was it. That is all I came back with was
Right.
milk, and she was furious.
well, I mean, thankfully the
What's
founding
shorthand is like? What, like notes? I mean, how do you describe shorthand?
Yeah,
Is it like
it's like
abbreviated things or what?
kind of like, do you know? And I don't know this for certain, but like, when they put like the W and the slash, like that means with.
Oh yeah.
And like there's lots of like symbols where like if things like that mean words or whatever. And from what my mom told me is that a lot of secretaries used it because like their boss or whatever would say, take this memo, and they would talk real fast, so that they needed to be able to write it really fast
Yeah, I
too.
get that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So it just, the gravity of it started to set in, and I realized, and I think, because I had heard that stuff about Common Core before I started working with this teacher, and then whenever I met him and he kind of expressed to me like that he didn't understand how to read that, it really became real to me that, wow, like, to me, I just take it for granted. Like, I know how to read cursive. It's not a big deal. And I would just assume that anybody that can read English can read cursive, but that's not true. And it really is very different. And so, that aside, because that's not necessarily what we're talking about today, but the world that our students and that we are living in now is not as written, it's not as driven by writing as it was, because we've found different ways to communicate. And so the thing is, as we kind of look at this, I found a really interesting promotional video from Boston University. And what it basically is to new students. And it's explaining what they should expect whenever they enroll to Boston University. And it tells them the importance of writing at the university. And it basically is kind of saying like, hey, you better step up your game and be ready because you're going to be expected to write. So let's take a listen to this, and then we'll kind of get some comments and some thoughts on it.
I think students should be expected that they're going to be reading and writing right from the word go, right from the start.
Pretty much from the first week of classes, students are getting significant reading and writing assignments.
You're required to analyze what you read in order to produce your own work.
It took me a couple of semesters to be able to fully express myself in writing and to comprehend what I'm reading.
So probably like 5 to 10 pages of reading before every class.
The adjustment as far as writing goes is probably that they need to learn how to write for the different disciplines.
They may need to write some summaries of reading. They need to write for lab reports. Pretty much all of their classes will require some writing.
Writing is a very, very essential skill here. You write everywhere.
The reading and writing preparation that I had to do for my writing classes was especially helpful to me as a mathematics major because I was being made to read faster, read more in depth, and that helped me understand what the professor needed from me.
Professors and people who are reading their writing want to know what their arguments are. They want to know what their point of view is, what their claims are, what their evidence is.
Students need to be able to acknowledge what a source has said and restate that in their own words without plagiarism, with proper citation.
They tell you over and over again, if you didn't come up with it, if it's not your original idea, you have to cite wherever you found it from. So if you have to Google anything, the page that you open, you have to cite it.
Okay, so here's something that like I say a lot. I don't know if I've ever said it on a podcast before, but everything is everything. Like, no matter what you do in academics, as long as you're doing something in academics, it's going to make you smarter.
Mm-hmm.
Reading and writing, no matter what it is or what subject it's in, will make you smarter. It will make you a faster thinker. It will make you better at breaking things down. It'll make you faster at comprehending things, and it'll just be good for you. I don't think anyone's ever read a book or wrote something and was like, I'm worse now.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, I'm sure that there are some jokes of saying that book was so bad that I'm probably better off without it.
Right.
But you actively engaging your mind, because when you read something, you have to physically engage yourself in another level than you do when you just sit there passively watching a show. Because you're watching the show, yes, you have to comprehend. Yeah, there are some really intense shows that are out there, some hard movies, something like that, where it might be hard for you to keep following along the story, but it's not the same as you holding a book or even a tablet or whatever it is and reading it and then building it in your mind. You are creating whatever you read in your mind. And then writing is the exact opposite. You are taking whatever is in your mind and you are putting it on paper. And I think the main reason why kids and people in general don't like to especially write is because they get frustrated with, they know what it is up here, but they don't know how to get it out on paper, and they don't know how to get their thoughts articulated. And I think that's one of the reasons why people fall to drawing or art or music or something like that. Not discrediting any of those things, but I think that it's like, well, I can't write it in words, so let me show you in images. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not discrediting that stuff, because that is a whole nother way of activation of your brain too. I'm just saying that it's hard, and people in general, people don't want to do things that are hard. Brett, you got something?
Right. Okay. Well, no, I'm curious. So Mosley, you have recently finished teaching at the college level, right? And so we just were able to watch this promo video And it was really kind of telling the students, like, here's what to prepare for. It had, teacher, professor point of view. It had student point of view of like what they were expected to do. So I get it. This was very much a promotional video, but at the same time, it packed a powerful punch to realize, like, if I'm going to do work at a university level, it is expected that I am going to be writing. And like Tyler just said, that can be really intimidating for a lot of students because they maybe have really high level thoughts, but they don't know how to get it onto the page. So what was your general impression of that? And what did you think? And did that hold true to you? Because Boston University is Boston, but you were here at the University of Texas. So, how did you feel that was accurate? And do you think that, that is academia and that's what the kids need to be able to do?
Yeah, I think so too. And from the student side, as a master's student, I think one thing, because that's a whole different level from the undergraduate, is I experienced that myself because, being a teacher, you have to come up with different words and like how you want things to sound and whatever, and get it to the kids. So as a young teacher, my thing is I'm trying to develop a vocabulary. So one thing that writing does is expose your level of vocabulary. And so writing, I think, also pushes you to expand that. And when I was, I felt really uncomfortable my first couple of years in the master's program because I was around all these PhDs and these super, super brainy people. And I understood the music side of it, but I didn't understand how to get my thoughts out on that level for them to understand, like to explain myself on why I made certain musical decisions. So what I did was, and this can be a strategy too you can have for your kids, is every time I would hear something or like a word or I just wasn't comfortable with, I would just write it down. I had a little note on my notepad, my phone. And so like I just had a list of like, it ended up being like 50 words, and I would just go through those words and then just see how I could use that. And then, I would start to incorporate that in my writing. And then my writing level just went from, undergraduate to a master's level, writing. It took some time, but it starts off in a really uncomfortable place. So I think, as someone, if you're trying to incorporate that in the classroom, it's vocabulary, so if like you talk just one word, have them write one word and then try to expand, what they're able to say and how they can say it and different ways to say it. And then you just kind of go from there, because it definitely is an expectation that you are writing on this level at the college level, and I experienced that on the student side and on the teacher side in the college realm.
See, okay. And I think that writing is, it's like, I don't want to say it's the perfect mixture, but it definitely has creativity in there. I mean, there's creative writing classes, it has a huge spectrum of like, this is like the research paper and like no opinion, like it needs to be void of like person, right? Just straight facts. And then you have things like comic books, like someone had to write that out. Now also they drew it and stuff like that, of that stuff too. And I think that writing can be a good segue between like maybe that kid who's like very involved in art and only wants to draw things to express themselves. Well, if you can teach someone how to write properly, then that's a whole nother way for them to express themselves. And I know, because I like writing short stories on my own. I never show them to anybody, but I sure do like to read them late at night before I go to bed, and it's a fun thing to do, to create this world or something like that. Or if you're like, have something that's really near and dear to your heart. Like I remember when I was exiting high school, my grandfather died. And I had a lot of thoughts about life and death. It was the first time in my entire life that someone close to me that I was consciously aware of had passed away. and I wrote a 3-page paper on life and death and my thoughts on it. And I just kind of did it just because I thought what I was saying was, I was a little arrogant. I thought what I said was like revolutionary, when in reality it's not. It was the same thing that everybody else says about life and death. And I remember like my entire family was so impressed with it that this 17-year-old boy did this. I read it at his funeral. So if I didn't possess the ability to express myself in some form of written language, of being able to get it from my brain to the paper, then like that moment would never have happened. And I would have never been able to express that the way it needed to be expressed to everyone else there who was at the viewing or at the funeral or at wherever it was. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and you bring up a good point, because we've kind of talked about the whole university track, right? And going to higher level education. And I think it's kind of understood that you're going to need to write in college. I think that students don't necessarily realize how much they're going to have to write. But I think teachers, we understand that because we've all been through that system. Okay. So whenever it comes to this, it's easy for us to say like, well, you're going to need to write in college, right? And for us to, really push that on our kids. But what about the tons of kids who are not going to go to a university? And and we can't allow that to be a bad thing, because there are a whole lot of vocations that don't require university level work, where those kids are going to make way more than a teacher. They're going to make way more than somebody with a college degree. In fact, they might even get a job, where some people with a college degree are not going to get a job. Sure. You know what I'm saying? And so we have to also help students to understand the importance of writing for non-university pathways, right? And so there was a list that was put out, and it was compiled from Brown University and the University of Missouri. And I found it really interesting because it goes through and it kind of explains why is writing so important. And it kind of says it to the students. So I want to share some of these. And as we talk through them, if you want to give some comment or whatever, just let me know. Okay. So the first thing that we need to help students understand is that writing is the primary basis upon which their work and their learning and their intellect will be judged, whether that's in college or the workplace or the community. That is how they express themselves, right? Second thing is that writing expresses who you are as a person, okay? And I think in a way, Tyler, that's kind of what you were talking about, whether it's through your short stories or, your reflective thoughts about your grandfather. I mean, you were able to express yourself, and that's why it was important to your family, because it was from your heart, I think that a lot of times students don't realize this, that writing is portable and it's permanent and it makes your thinking visible. And if anything, because I know like right now we may be talking and you're not a language arts teacher. You're not required to teach kids to write. But you know what? You're forgetting that it is so important that kids are able to make their thinking visible in your content as well. So I'm a fine arts educator, right? And one of the things that I've done with College Board is we've done a lot of training with like pre-AP, getting kids ready not only for AP coursework and university level coursework, but just doing things at really high levels. And one of the things that we really talk about is like, okay, in the fine arts world, as an artist of whatever discipline I am, what are the skills I have to be able to do? And you could say that in anything, as a scientist, as a mathematician, as a doctor, as a lawyer, what are the skills that I need? And in every one of those, you're going to have to be able to express your thoughts in writing. Even a visual artist is going to need to be able to create that blurb that describes the painting that they just made. Otherwise, it's left totally to interpretation and people may not understand where they're coming from. So they have to be able to do these things. And so writing is an essential skill in every content area. And I think as teachers, we're doing our students a disservice if we don't make sure that they understand the importance of writing. And they're not going to understand it if we don't write in our classrooms.
Look, okay, and let me tell you this. This is something that I noticed a long time ago because, like, man, before I was like 504 and dyslexic or whatever, like I would sit there and I would bang my head against the wall wondering why I was getting 6s on my spelling tests, trying to figure it out. And that's like, and I'll never forget the moment I made a 6 on a spelling test. I was in 3rd grade the first time, and it was like
this is 6 out of 100.
This was 6 out of 100. Yes, sir.
Okay. And if it was 6 out of 10?
No.
Okay.
I think it was 25 words or 28 words or something like that. And I made a 6.
Got it.
So you basically
The point
got one
is
right.
that it was a single digit number. Maybe
Right.
it wasn't 6.
Yeah.
It was bad.
So you spelled your name wrong too.
I probably did.
Gotcha.
And that's something that I have always been hyper aware of, is like my spelling, my writing, and subsequently my math. And because I'm actually really strong in math. And I've noticed throughout the years that the 2 number 1 things that everyone is insecure about is their math or their writing or their spelling. And it's astonishes me, because there's so many things that we judge are like, this makes you smart or this makes you intelligent, and all of these things. But in reality, the 2 number 1 things that people like that are unspoken, if you spell really good, then like you're considered, well, like you're way smarter than me because you can spell that. You can spell potato.
People say
You know
that.
what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like, it's like, oh man, like, it's been a long time since math class. I'm like, but it hasn't been a long time since you balanced your checkbook.
Right.
So like, why are you so bad in math? You know what I'm saying?
Well,
and
arguably though, are people still,
what's a checkbook?
Are people still balancing checkbooks, or do they
Right,
just check
I
it
know.
online and whatever it says, that must be what it is?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess
what's
that's true. I
What's
still
a
put all my
checkbook?
finances in a spreadsheet and do that because I'm poor and I want to make sure that I have money.
Wow. So our next Teach Becker episode will be teaching everyone how to make a spreadsheet of your finances, and Tyler will be leading that. So
Yes.
I can do that. So my point being is that, like, and think about the other way too, is that if you're really smart, or not really, if you're really good, even I'm getting tripped up on it. If you're really good at spelling or math, those type of people are usually kind of cocky, and they're usually kind of like, they can even be a little smug about it.
Right.
Like, I know that there's a few people who I just refused to like let them read my papers, because I knew that they were just going to be like, you did this and you did this, which, I want that, but I don't want them to be ugly about it. You know what I'm saying?
Right. So, well, looking through this list, there's a couple more highlights that I think are interesting. One says this, that writing helps you move easily among facts, interferences, and opinions without getting confused and without confusing your reader. So it's like whenever you write, it's easier to organize your thinking, as opposed to maybe just when you're speaking. I mean, think how many times we ramble, or we say this or that, and then you're like, what I mean is this,
Yeah.
Writing gives you the ability to be able to kind of bypass all of that,
That's true. I am a rambler.
I don't know, Tyler. You always say you're a rambler. I don't feel like you're a rambler. If you think Tyler's a rambler, email us at info@teachbigger.com and let us know.
And put in the subject line rambler.
Right. And no, seriously, we would love your feedback, especially about Tyler.
No, well, I think more offline you're a rambler. Online you're not. I think you have a lot of thoughts, and you feel like you are because you're talking a lot.
And so now I have this insecure moment where I feel like the people that are listening go, no, actually, Pratt's the rambler.
Yeah. But you're the preacher. You get your moments, where you preach and stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
That's fine.
So anyways.
So I started doing that after I worked with you.
Rambling?
And just having the just having the kids write just a little bit, and it more here lately it's been to jot down things like a word here or something that I said or something conceptually that we worked on, because we talked a lot about learning levels last year and just how to receive information and put the ownership in their court. And so what I told them, I said, as we work every day, like we move up a level. And so what I'm trying to do is what I have, my education, the information I have, I'm trying to get you to a certain point. And every day, like I pour into you and I give you some things to just take a step further. I was like, if I repeat things and we go back and then I pick you back up to where we left off. So if you can, like, as we go through the day, jot down some things, it might be different from person to person, but something that can jog your memory. And then when we start class, I say this, I said, read your notes, and they'll actually look at their notes and they'll read through it. And sometimes I say, hey, Johnny, what'd you read? Oh, about this and this and that. And that you said, blah, 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 blah. And then like the class will start where we left off, and then sometimes we'll start like at the beginning of class, we call it fundamentals. and just kind of getting back into the basis of things. And then if something doesn't sound right, I'll just say, stop, go read your notes.
Mm-hmm.
And then they'll stop and they'll all like, because everybody has a writing utensil. I say writing utensil. And then they'll read the notes and then we'll do it again. And then it just sounds totally different because they've had a chance to like jog their memory. And it's what they wrote. No one else knows exactly what's going on. They don't have to present it. It's just something that they can go back to, every day. So,
and I think
I make them write.
I think there's something liberating in that because with my students, one of the things I found out is that kids aren't really tech savvy. They're app savvy. They don't really know how to work a computer.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't even know how to make a folder on the desktop. And I'm sure we have some listeners that are like, yeah, how do you do that? You right click and you hit new and then you hit folder. Okay. Anyway, I was having them make folders and there was a lot of kids who like, they didn't do it. And then like I got on one-on-one with them. I was like, yeah, you just make your folder. You know how to do it? They're like, yeah. And then they gets to like labeling it. They're like, well, can I just keep it as new folder? I'm like, no, like spell Photoshop tutorial. And they're like, I don't know how to spell tutorial. And I was like, who do you think is going to see this folder other than you? And they're like, oh, yeah. Okay. And then it's like, yeah, no one's going to see any of this stuff that I'm going to do other than you, Mr. Lamont. I was like, yeah, that's true. And like, I mean, I'll correct you if you need help, but like no one's going to like sit there and judge at you. And then when they have that feeling, it kind of liberates them a little bit to go and write a little bit more. Because we do notes in my class about copyright law and things of that nature. So.
Okay. So, like I had said earlier, it was like every school district that I went to, there was always a writing issue. And I started to hear this a lot, that we need to make sure everybody's writing in every class every day, right? And that was kind of like this mandate that sort of got passed down from the top. And it was like, everybody needs to be writing every class every day. And so much so that in some districts, they would actually have you like stop and you had to do like a writing assignment, regardless of your content, that maybe had nothing to do with your content. Okay. So what I did, So what I did was this. I just took the bull by the horns and I embraced it. Okay. And here's what I'm going to encourage you, like, teach bigger tip number 1. Don't complain about it. Embrace it. Okay. And so I had all this coming from me from every angle. It was like, we got to write. So I said, you know what? Then we're going to make this for real. We're going to make it happen. I could have said, I'm not doing that because I'm a band director and we don't write in band. And believe me, I have heard many a band director say that kind of thing, right? But I was like, okay, fine. We're going to write in band and we're going to be the best writers in the school. That's how we're going to roll. And so what I did is I do what I always do, and I created a system. I created a methodology of how we were going to write in my class. And so
I thought you were going to say you created an acronym like you normally do.
Oh, he loves those acronyms.
I probably need to, but
man.
What I want to do is I'm going to share those thoughts with you and then, see how it fits for you. And maybe if you're not a writing teacher and you're going like, okay, this is something I need to be doing, hopefully this pushes you in the right direction. So there is a really spectacular book by Doug Lemov called Teach Like a Champion. Okay. And he actually goes through this as well. And so a lot of this I did adapt from what he was talking about. So I would encourage you, go get that book, Teach Like a Champion. He has several versions out now. I don't know what version he's on now, but
I think he's on 2.2. I have it on my shelf.
There you go. He has a section there called Everybody Writes, right? And it's the idea of everybody in your class writing. And he goes through a whole bunch of great stuff. And I'm not going to read or say any of that. I just want to share with you what I did, but I would definitely encourage you to check that out because you get a lot of detail from him and he's done some great work and research in this area. But the first thing that he talks about is this, that when students write in your classroom, that it gives you like this benefit that you can find responses that you're looking for. So in other words, if I ask a question, I'm going to get Susie and James, and they always answer the question, right? And nobody else is even engaged. But if I say, everybody write the answer to this question, then I can circulate the room and walk around and see what people are writing. One, that's a form of formative assessment because then I know where we are. But also, if I see a student who's done really well, this is what I love about it. I can say, hey, Johnny, will you read what you wrote? And now kids don't feel like they're so on the spot anymore to just come up with an answer. All they have to do is just read something. Now, it is what they've written, and so it is their original thought, but you get much more robust answers when you do that. And so when I started doing this, I realized, like, man, this is a game changer, because I can really lead the direction of my class in the way that I want it to go, because I already know what everybody's thinking. So that's a huge benefit. So I want to kind of talk about the process of how I started this, because, I was a band director, and so we weren't writing on a consistent basis. We were maybe taking some notes on our music every once in a while, but it certainly wasn't something that we did. And so, I first went in guns a-blazing. I was like, we're going to write a half-page essay, and I want you to tell me what you think about A, B, C, and D. Well, that did not go well, because you've got to remember, I'm in a school where writing is bad. And by having them do that, I realized how bad the writing was. I was like, oh my gosh, they're not kidding. These kids don't know what they're talking about. Like, they spell poorly, they don't use any punctuation, and they don't have any coherent thoughts. Like, there's no understanding of when sentences should start and stop. I mean, like, it was bad, and this was high school, okay? And I don't mean that negatively. It is what it was. It was what it was. So I said, okay, then we're going to go from the very foundation, and we're going to build this in the classroom. So I started with one word. So I would ask a question, and I would say, like, maybe we would listen to something, or we would play something. And so, think about an activity you might do in your class, and then say, okay, I want you to write one word that described exactly how you felt, or one word that describes a challenge, or how, what you're thinking, whatever. And I just started with getting them to do the action of writing one word. And most kids can think of one word, and they're not intimidated by one word, right? And so from then, we maybe do that a day or two or a week, and just getting them used to the process of actually picking up a pencil and writing, right? So if I'm a science teacher or a math teacher or whatever, that may not be what I'm always doing. Maybe I'm doing labs. Maybe we're doing, math problems, and we're not writing sentences. Maybe we're not even writing words. Maybe we're just writing numbers. And so to get them to translate your content into a word is different. So for my band kids, it was different to translate our content into an actual word that they put on a page. And so then once they felt pretty comfortable with just the process of that, then I might have said, okay, now this time I want you to write 3 words, and you can list them, or it could be a phrase, but I want you to write 3 words to answer whatever the question might be. Okay. And then a lot of times I would even make a game out of it. I would say things like, okay, I want you to think of 5 words that start with the letter A, or whatever, and you're just building this, comfortability of writing in the classroom. And so then from that point, then I could say, okay, I want you to write 1 complete sentence, or I want you to write a question, or whatever the case may be. And then we just grew from there. And over the course of maybe a semester, by the end of that semester, I have them writing a paragraph. Okay. Now look, the goal was never that we write huge 5-page essays in band. That wasn't the goal. The goal was that we got their thoughts on paper, and that they were using correct vocabulary, and that they made sense, and it was grammatically correct. That was the goal. And you may be going like, well, I'm not even good at spelling, or I'm not even good at grammar. Okay, well, that's okay. You don't have to be, because what you should be looking for is the content. Are they expressing themselves, and are they getting the point across of their understanding of the content? And this is the big one, and this is why I think it's so important for us to be writing in every classroom, because then that's when they can use academic vocabulary in your subject matter, because the vocabulary I need to use in music is very different than the vocabulary I'm going to use in math or science or whatever the case may be. And I want to know that the kids understand the vocabulary and they can use it correctly. So that was just kind of my process. I just kind of built on it, starting with one word and getting all the way to, paragraphs. And you know what was interesting is the kids didn't complain when I did that. When I first did it, I was like, okay, I want you to write an essay. It was like, oh, right. Like, oh, why do we have to do that? But when I said write one word, nobody said anything. It was no big deal. And sometimes I was like, hey, read your word. What word did you write? Whatever. And then we moved to 3 words. We moved to 5 words. We moved to a sentence. Nobody cared about those things. And then I was to a point where I was like, okay, I want you to write 3 sentences that describe this, or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And it was never a big deal. And the next thing you know, I even showed them one time, I'm like, okay, I want you to, because we would keep a journal in our class. And so they would write in the same journal every day, whether it's notes or whatever. And so I go, I want you to turn back to the month of this. And I'm like, I want you to look what you wrote. And they would see their 1 word or their 2 words. Now I want you to flip to what we just did. And suddenly they realize I just wrote a half a page. Right. And you didn't think anything of it. And look what you've been able to do. And it makes writing less scary for them when you take them through the process. So I think that's my encouragement, and my takeaway is there's a process to it. And when you have kids that aren't strong writers, or maybe they're not strong writers in your content, you have to take them through the steps to understand how to get their thoughts on paper. I don't know if anybody wants to say anything.
I'll
too.
say that thing that you said where I'm not like, because I'm not good at spelling. So when my kids write things, I tell them all the time, like, I'm not going to count off for spelling, although I will, I'll help you when I can. What I'm looking for is the content. Were you able to get across what you were trying to get across? Because not too long ago, we had this assignment where I gave them a whole bunch of logos, and they had to look at this logo and break it down in terms of like what age group was it aimed at, what is it marketing, why did they use the font, like they were really trying to critical think these things through but put it into words. And man, let me tell you what, I made some enemies last week because the kids who were already kind of rough around the edges, who were responding well to me, I was just like, man, all I did was ask you to write a sentence. I asked you to write a sentence, and that was it. And like, you're about to throw this computer. Right. But I wanted to say this earlier, and I totally forgot. I think this is so imperative because when I got to college, when I got to Sam Houston, I had a teacher there. I'll never forget him as long as I live. He's 100% brilliant. He is from Europe. He went to no, he's from Italy. Anyway, he went to like the major school of music in Italy or whatever, and he played in the same church that Mozart played in when he was young. Like, he was like this amazing dude, and he taught me music history. And this was his standard. This was, and I just think about this. He wanted us to read one chapter from the music history book before every class. And he wanted us to be able to either write or discuss about what we had read in the next class. I couldn't do it.
So yeah, I know who you're talking about, and he's one of the most brilliant people I know. And could you imagine doing a master's oral comprehensive exam sitting on the other side of the table from this brilliant person? Okay, there you go.
No, I can't, because I remember when I was in his class, and I remember being really, really frustrated that I couldn't do this, because in my mind, I was like, he's literally asking to read one chapter. That's two. I had him on Tuesdays and Thursdays. So it was only 2 chapters a week, and I couldn't make it happen because I couldn't read fast enough. I couldn't comprehend the vocabulary that was in there. I couldn't. And what made me even more frustrated is that all my colleagues that were in this class blamed him instead of themselves. And like, we're like, he's not just giving us grades and da da da. And I'm like, you're in college now. Like, you realize, and I remember one day I even put it, I was like, you realize he's only asking us to read 2 chapters a week, right? And then when I put it like that, they're like, yeah, I guess. But it's still too much. And I'm like, I don't think so. So I thought that was absolutely insane. And then a flip side of that is I had to write a research paper. And at this point in my life, I'm now in my 5th year of college. And I feel that I am a pretty strong writer. And I've mastered MLA format, even though no one uses MLA format except for high school teachers and like the occasional English teacher in college. And now I'm being asked to write in this completely different format. But I feel pretty strong in my writing ability. Right. And I write this 5-page research paper. It's a rough draft. And I'm like, hey, will you read it? And I asked the same teacher, I'm like, will you read this and like give me some feedback? And he, in a very nice way, completely tears it up. He looks at me and he's like, you write like an American. Wow. He's like, there are tons of continuity issues. Wow. You can't say this. This is a logical fallacy. You can't put this in a research paper. He's like, I can tell that you wrote this paper. When I read a research paper, I shouldn't be able to tell who wrote it.
Wow.
That's crazy. I was like, Oh my God. And I went back to him 5 other times for him to revise my paper, and I still made a B.
Wow. That's crazy. Okay, so I'm curious. So to all of our listeners outside of the U.S., you're not going to hurt our feelings here at Teach Bigger, because we're all about exposing truth and making things better. So if the perception of, especially maybe the European countries, I don't know, is that we don't write well, I would love to know. I'm curious what you think. And I mean, we have some of our friends listening in Japan or New Zealand. Like, what do y'all think about the way we write? What do y'all think? I just exposed my roots right there.
Look, I think I have the answers behind this one. Here they come.
That's
Here
okay.
They come.
But you know what?
Yeah,
maybe that's,
I don't think it's a very.
look,
It's
maybe that's why they're listening. They're like, oh, they're so cute. Bless their hearts.
Oh, they're so cute.
Right.
Yeah. So literate.
So to our international friends, we beg for your feedback. So email us at info@teachbigger.com, info@teachbigger.com, and let us know, hey, yeah, the perception is that you all don't really know what you're talking about. And we like that. We want to make things better. And so if so, we can work on it. We'll try.
Mm-hmm.
But no, you bring up a great point. And so, there's a lot of power in the pencil. Writing is so important. And I don't think any educator is going to disagree. Like, yes, writing's important. But I think that the challenge from today's episode is really, are you going to embrace that challenge? And are you going to let your content be a content that is a driving force in a student's journey to learn how to write? And it starts young. It starts in elementary school. It starts in kindergarten, first grade, whatever the case may be. But we can't leave it to elementary school teachers to do that job. I can't tell you how many times that a high school teacher, I've heard it, well, they're in the 9th grade and they don't even know how to do this, or this. And that's all the fault of these people down here that are not on this campus, fill in the blank. But the reality is, but they are who we have, and they are the kids that have been entrusted to us, and we've got to fill in the gaps. And it may not be fair, it may not be right, and there may be a million reasons why it didn't happen. But that kid deserves to get to know how to read and to get to know how to write. And if they're there, we can teach them. And you know what? A band director or a math teacher or a PE coach is just as capable of teaching a kid how to write intelligently as a language arts teacher. It may not be that you know every grammar rule, and that's not the point. The point is that you can teach them how to express themselves in an intelligent way and in a way that they can communicate to others. So hopefully you've enjoyed today's podcast. We encourage you, if you're not already subscribed, to subscribe to the podcast. That way you get notifications whenever we post every Monday and Wednesday. Sure. And I hope that today was thought-provoking for you. I hope that you take this and run with it. If you're not already writing in your classroom, start tomorrow.
Write with it.
Right. Take it and write with it. Exactly. So start tomorrow. Have your kids write one word, and make it happen. And you know what? They may complain, but that's okay.
No, they always complain. If you're a teacher, they complain. So.
Right. So that's just like every other day in your class. So it's okay. But we're gonna get them to do it. So we would love to hear your ideas. Or maybe you're like a pro at this. Maybe you have kids writing all the time and they're writing really sophisticatedly. Then I would encourage you to reach out to us and let us know. Like, what are you doing? We would love the feedback. We would love to know, what techniques are you using? What are you doing? So I encourage you to share this episode on social media. Share it with your friends on Twitter, with your friends on Facebook, whatever the case may be. We would love to reach out to more and more people. So we encourage you to do that. So our follow-up episode to this is coming out in a couple of days. And we're going to be discussing still the power of the pencil, but in a totally different way. We're not going to be discussing writing as much as we're going to be discussing culture and ownership and responsibility and how a pencil can promote that in your classroom. So you don't want to miss the next episode. It's going to be part 2 of The Power of the Pencil. And until then, we hope that you have a great week, and we'll be back with you next time.
Oh, yeah.